I still remember the exact moment my world shattered into a million pieces. It wasn't a sudden violent explosion, but a slow, agonizing crack, like watching a priceless vase fall in excruciatingly slow motion, knowing it would inevitably splinter into irreparable fragments. My son, Michael, my only child, the boy I had raised with every ounce of love, every drop of sweat, and every fiber of sacrifice I possessed, looked at me with eyes that were utterly devoid of warmth, of recognition, of anything that resembled the profound, unconditional bond we once shared. He stood there, a stranger in his own skin, in the opulent, cavernous foyer of his newly acquired mansion, a cold, gleaming monument to the overnight fortune he'd amassed. His words, delivered with a chilling, surgical precision, cut deeper than any blade, severing not just a connection but a lifetime of shared dreams and unspoken promises. "Dad," he began, his voice flat, devoid of any discernible emotion, resonating with an unfamiliar, almost clinical detachment. "I think it's time we establish some clear boundaries. My life has evolved significantly. I now have new priorities, a vastly different social circle, and a network of connections that demand a certain level of alignment. And frankly, your continued presence, it's simply not conducive to the public image I need to meticulously cultivate and maintain." The air left my lungs in a ragged gasp. A cold, creeping dread seeped into my very bones, colder than the polished Italian marble beneath my worn, scuffed work boots. I had just driven 3 grueling hours from my small, cluttered apartment in Portland, my heart brimming with an almost childlike excitement, eager to celebrate his monumental success, to finally witness the tangible fruits of his relentless ambition. He had called me just days before, his voice bubbling with an unfamiliar, almost manic excitement, telling me his tech startup, the one he'd poured his entire being into for years, had been acquired for an astronomical, mind-boggling sum. He was a millionaire, overnight. My boy Michael, who used to spend countless hours in the dusty garage with me, his small hands greasy from tinkering with old sputtering engines, his bright eyes filled with the boundless dreams of a better, brighter life. "Boundaries, Michael?" I managed to choke out, my voice raspy with disbelief, a desperate plea hidden beneath the question. "What on earth are you talking about? I'm your father. I simply wanted to congratulate you, to see you, to share in this incredible moment." He sighed, a dismissive, almost impatient sound that echoed unnervingly in the vast, empty space, amplifying the chasm between us. "Look, I genuinely appreciate the sentiment, Dad, but this isn't the old days, as you call them. This isn't about fixing leaky faucets or changing the oil in a beat-up sedan. This is about multi-million-dollar deals, high-profile investors, navigating complex corporate mergers, and cultivating a social circle that, well, it just doesn't align, or frankly integrate with your background, my background." The words hung in the sterile air, heavy with unspoken judgment, laden with a condescension that stung more than any direct insult. My hands, calloused and scarred from decades of honest, back-breaking labor, suddenly felt clumsy, out of place, an embarrassing testament to a life he now clearly disdained. I looked down at my clothes, a clean but faded flannel shirt, jeans that had seen countless repairs and far too many years. I was a mechanic, a simple working-class man who had toiled tirelessly his entire life to provide for his family, to give Michael every single opportunity I had been denied. I had put him through college, sacrificing my own comforts, my own retirement savings, believing implicitly in his grand, audacious dreams even when they seemed impossibly distant. And now, my background was not just an inconvenience. It was a glaring liability, a stain on his pristine new image. "Are you saying you don't want me here?" The question was a whisper, barely audible above the frantic pounding of my own heart, but it carried the crushing weight of a lifetime of unwavering love and profound expectation. He finally met my gaze, and in his eyes I saw it, a cold, calculated detachment, a chilling absence of any familial warmth. "I'm saying," he articulated slowly, deliberately as if speaking to a slow-witted child, "that for the foreseeable future, it's best if we maintain a significant distance. I will, of course, arrange for a generous monthly allowance, enough to ensure you're more than comfortable, but I require space. I need to focus entirely on this new, demanding chapter of my life without any unnecessary distractions." Distractions. That's what I was. A distraction. The man who taught him to ride a bike, patiently running alongside him until he found his balance. The father who stayed up all night cradling him when he had the flu, wiping his feverish brow. The loudest cheerleader at every single Little League game, every school play, The unwavering supporter who believed in him when no one else did. When his ideas seemed outlandish and his path uncertain, I was a mere distraction to his newfound glittering wealth, his meticulously constructed new life. A sudden overwhelming wave of nausea washed over me. My vision blurred, and the grand foyer with its soaring ceilings, its glittering crystal chandeliers, and its imposing marble columns seemed to spin violently around me. I gripped the ornate doorframe, my knuckles white, trying desperately to steady myself to anchor my reeling senses. "Michael," I pleaded, my voice cracking with a raw, desperate emotion. "Please, don't do this. We're family. We're all each other has." He took another step back, recoiling slightly, as if my touch, my very presence, might somehow contaminate his pristine new existence. "Family is a complex construct, Dad, and sometimes for optimal growth, you need to prune the dead branches. It's a necessary, albeit difficult, part of evolution." Dead branches. That was me. Pruned, cut off, discarded. A withered, useless appendage to his magnificent, blossoming tree. I stood there, a suffocating lump forming in my throat, too stunned, too heartbroken to utter another word. The silence that followed was deafening, filled only with the agonizing echo of his cruel, dismissive words. He didn't offer me a glass of water, didn't ask if I needed a ride, didn't even look at me with a flicker of remorse or regret. He simply stood there, an impassive, unfeeling stranger in my son's skin, waiting for me to acknowledge my dismissal and leave. My heart, which had swelled with an almost unbearable pride just moments before, now felt like a shriveled, bruised, and utterly worthless thing. I turned, slowly, my legs heavy, each step an act of immense effort, and walked out of that mansion, out of his life, leaving behind not just a house but a lifetime of cherished memories, of shared hopes, and of deeply ingrained dreams. The long, desolate drive back to Portland was a blur of unshed tears and profound disbelief. I kept replaying his words over and over, searching frantically for a hidden meaning, a cruel joke, anything that would explain this sudden, brutal, and utterly inexplicable rejection. But there was nothing, just the cold, hard, undeniable truth. My son, the newly minted millionaire, had no room, no space, no desire for his father in his glittering new world. The days that followed were an unending torment. I tried to call him, repeatedly, but my calls went straight to voicemail, the automated message a constant mocking reminder of his inaccessibility. My texts, filled with desperate pleas and unanswered questions, went unread, unacknowledged. The monthly allowance he promised arrived promptly, a stark, insulting reminder of his dismissal, a monetary substitute for the love and connection he had so coldly withdrawn. It felt like blood money, tainted by his profound indifference, and I couldn't bring myself to touch it, to spend a single cent. My friends, my colleagues at the garage noticed the profound change in me. The usual cheerful banter, the easy camaraderie, was gone, replaced by a hollow, brooding silence. I told them Michael was busy, that he was simply adjusting to the overwhelming demands of his new life, but the lie tasted bitter, acrid on my tongue. How could I possibly explain that my own son, the boy I had dedicated my life to, had disowned me for simply being me? I spent my evenings alone, in the dim light of my living room, staring at old, faded photographs. Michael as a baby, his tiny, perfect hand gripping my calloused finger. Michael perched precariously on my shoulders at a 4th of July parade, his face alight with wonder. Michael beaming with pride, holding up his high school diploma, his future seemingly limitless. Each picture was a painful, agonizing reminder of a past that now felt like a cruel, deceptive illusion. Had I imagined our bond? Had I been so utterly blind to the raw, unbridled ambition that had always simmered just beneath his surface, an ambition that now seemed to have consumed his very soul, leaving no room for anything else? The world, oblivious to my personal tragedy, moved relentlessly on. News articles flashed across my phone, detailing Michael's meteoric rise, his lavish, extravagant parties, his carefully orchestrated philanthropic gestures that seemed more about burnishing his public image than about genuine compassion. He was everywhere, the golden boy, the quintessential self-made success story, lauded and admired. And I, his father, was nowhere, an erased chapter, a forgotten footnote in his grand, self-serving narrative. The pain was a constant, gnawing ache, a dull, persistent throb behind my ribs that never truly subsided, a phantom limb of a relationship that had been brutally amputated. I missed him, not the millionaire, not the public figure, but the boy, the son who used to look at me with unadulterated admiration and genuine love. I missed our easy conversations, our shared laughter, the simple comforting presence of his being. I tried desperately to rationalize it. Perhaps he was simply overwhelmed by the suddenness of his success, by the immense pressures of his new world. Perhaps he was trying, in his own misguided way, to protect me from the harsh, blinding glare of his new reality. But deep down, in the quiet, honest chambers of my heart, I knew it was simpler and far more devastating. He was profoundly ashamed of me, ashamed of my humble life, my working-class hands, my inability to seamlessly fit into his glittering, exclusive new reality. And that shame, that brutal, unequivocal rejection, was a wound that festered, poisoning every cherished memory, every hopeful dream I had ever held for our shared future. I was adrift, a ship without a compass, lost in a vast, turbulent sea of grief, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of abandonment. My son, my anchor, my guiding star, had not just cut the rope. He had cast me adrift into the cold, unforgiving expanse. The months that followed Michael's brutal rejection were a strange, agonizing blend of profound personal agony and a detached, almost clinical observation. I couldn't bring myself to completely sever the ties, even though he had so decisively done so. I found myself compulsively checking news feeds, devouring every article, every snippet of information, following his public appearances with a morbid fascination, watching from afar as his life unfolded in a dizzying, almost grotesque display of unbridled excess. He bought a gleaming private jet, a sprawling yacht that dwarfed anything I'd ever seen, and a seemingly endless fleet of luxury cars. His social media accounts, once a private window into his life, became a meticulously curated gallery of exclusive, star-studded parties, fleeting celebrity encounters, and an endless parade of designer clothes. He was, to the casual observer, living the ultimate dream, the epitome of success. To me, however, it looked disturbingly like a gilded cage, a frantic, desperate pursuit of happiness that always seemed to remain just tantalizingly out of reach, no matter how much he acquired. I saw him constantly surrounded by new friends, a revolving door of sycophants, opportunistic hangers-on, and slick self-serving advisors. They laughed uproariously at his every joke, praised his every move with exaggerated enthusiasm, and seemed to vanish into thin air the very moment his back was turned, their loyalty as fleeting as smoke. I recognized the type instantly. I'd seen them around the garage, people who only stuck around as long as there was something tangible to gain, something to extract. My heart ached for him, knowing he was surrounded by such transparent fakes, by predators disguised as companions, yet I was utterly powerless to warn him. He wouldn't have listened anyway. He was too high up on his self-constructed pedestal, too utterly enamored with his dazzling new reality to see the vultures circling, patiently waiting for their moment to strike. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the cracks began to show, small fissures in the polished facade, almost invisible to the casual observer, but glaringly, painfully obvious to a father who knew his son, who could sense the slightest tremor in his foundation. The news articles, once uniformly glowing and celebratory, started to carry a subtly different, more critical tone. Whispers of questionable business decisions began to surface. Reports of lavish, unsustainable spending that outpaced even his immense, newly acquired wealth, and a growing, undeniable reputation for arrogance and a dismissive attitude towards those he deemed beneath him. I read about a disastrous multi-million-dollar investment in a dubious, unproven cryptocurrency scheme, a crippling lawsuit from a disgruntled former business partner alleging breach of contract and fraud, and a string of increasingly negative press related to his increasingly erratic, unpredictable public behavior. I saw grainy, unflattering pictures of him looking gaunt, his once bright eyes shadowed and sunken, a forced, brittle smile plastered on his face that didn't reach his eyes, the vibrant sparkle that once defined him, the youthful energy that had propelled him to success was gone, replaced by a brittle, almost desperate energy, a frantic attempt to maintain an illusion. He was losing weight at an alarming rate, his once vibrant complexion now pale and drawn, his movements jerky and agitated. He looked perpetually tired, utterly exhausted, even amidst the backdrop of his extravagant, supposedly carefree lifestyle. My mechanic's instinct, honed over decades of diagnosing subtle malfunctions in complex machinery, told me something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. This wasn't just the natural stress of managing a vast fortune. This was something far more profound, something insidious, eating away at him from the inside, consuming his very essence. One evening, a particularly disturbing, blurry photo of him surfaced, showing him stumbling out of a high-end exclusive club looking disoriented and utterly lost, supported by two burly men I didn't recognize. The accompanying caption hinted darkly at a wild, unforgettable night. My stomach clenched with a sickening dread. Michael had always been disciplined, focused, almost ascetic in his pursuit of his goals. This wasn't him. This wasn't the boy who used to wake up at dawn to study, who meticulously planned every single step of his entrepreneurial journey with precision. This was a stranger, a shadow of his former self, utterly lost in a world he was clearly not prepared for, a world that was consuming him. I wanted, desperately, to call him, to reach out, to tell him how worried I was, to offer a lifeline, but the searing memory of his cold, calculated rejection held me back. A powerful, invisible barrier. Prune the dead branches. The words echoed relentlessly in my mind, a constant mocking reminder of his dismissal. What right did I have to intervene? He had made his choice. He had chosen this life, these fleeting friends, this destructive path, and yet, the primal, paternal instinct, the deep-seated, unyielding need to protect my child, gnawed at me relentlessly, a constant, agonizing ache in my chest. One particularly alarming headline screamed across my screen, announcing a major legal battle, a devastating class-action lawsuit against his company that threatened to unravel everything he had built, however shakily. The details were murky, shrouded in legal jargon, but it involved serious allegations of widespread fraud and deceptive business practices. My heart sank, plummeting to the depths of despair. Michael, the boy who had always valued honesty above all else, who had been raised to believe in integrity and ethical conduct, was now embroiled in something so fundamentally dishonest, so morally corrupt. It was a profound betrayal of everything I had tried so painstakingly to instill in him, a complete repudiation of his upbringing. His public appearances became less and less frequent, almost non-existent. His once prolific social media posts became sporadic, then ceased altogether. The lavish parties, once a weekly occurrence, seemed to dwindle, then disappear. The private jet, once a symbol of his boundless success, was reportedly put up for sale, a desperate attempt to raise much-needed capital. The signs were undeniable, stark, and terrifyingly clear. The fragile empire he had built so quickly, so recklessly, was crumbling just as fast, collapsing under its own unsustainable weight. The fair-weather friends, as expected, began to disappear like shadows at dawn. The sycophants found new stars to orbit, new fortunes to leech onto. Michael, once the golden boy, the darling of the tech world, was rapidly becoming Michael, the cautionary tale, a stark warning of the perils of unbridled ambition and unchecked greed. I heard rumors through the grapevine, whispers from people who knew people in his rapidly shrinking new circle. He was losing money at an alarming, unsustainable rate. Bad investments, exorbitant legal fees from multiple lawsuits, and a lifestyle that even a multi-millionaire couldn't sustain indefinitely were draining his resources. The initial acquisition money, once thought inexhaustible, was rapidly depleting, vanishing like water in a desert. He was selling off assets, liquidating properties, desperately trying to stay afloat. The mansion, his grand symbol of success, was rumored to be next on the chopping block, a desperate, last-ditch attempt to stave off complete and utter financial ruin. The thought of him losing everything, of being utterly alone and adrift in a world he no longer understood, filled me with a complex, almost contradictory mix of emotions. There was a small, bitter part of me, a dark corner of my heart that felt a grim, fleeting satisfaction. He had rejected me for his wealth, for his new life of opulence, and now, with a cruel irony, his wealth was abandoning him, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. But that fleeting feeling of vindication was quickly, mercifully, overshadowed by a profound, overwhelming sadness. This was my son, my flesh and blood, and he was hurting, deeply, even if he was too proud, too broken to admit it. I started leaving subtle, almost imperceptible messages, not directly to him, but through mutual acquaintances, people who might still have a tenuous line to him, however indirect. "Tell Michael I'm thinking of him," I'd say casually, trying to sound nonchalant. "Hope he's doing okay despite everything." I never received a direct response, never a confirmation that the message had reached him, but I hoped desperately that the message, however diluted, however filtered, might somehow penetrate the walls he had built around himself. I wanted him to know, even in his darkest hour, that there was still someone who cared, someone who hadn't abandoned him, someone who still saw the boy beneath the broken facade. The silence from his end was deafening, a crushing weight that reinforced the idea that he truly wanted nothing to do with me, even as his world imploded around him. It made me question my own worth, my own role as a father. Had I failed him? Had I instilled the wrong values, inadvertently nurturing the seeds of his ambition into a destructive force? Or was this simply the inevitable, tragic consequence of a sudden, unearned fortune, a brutal test of character that he was failing spectacularly, publicly? I found myself pacing my small apartment late at night, the old photographs spread out on my kitchen table like a scattered deck of memories. I remembered the day he told me he wanted to start his own company, the fierce fire in his eyes, the boundless optimism that radiated from him. I remembered telling him, "Son, money comes and goes, like the tide. But integrity and family, those are the things that last. Those are the true treasures." He had nodded then, seemingly understanding, seemingly internalizing my words. Now, those words felt like a distant, hollow echo, lost in the deafening noise of his ambition and his subsequent, spectacular fall from grace. The news became more and more dire with each passing day. His company was facing imminent bankruptcy, a complete collapse. His personal assets were being systematically seized by creditors, one by one. The mansion, his symbol of success, was indeed on the market, a desperate, futile attempt to stave off complete financial ruin. He was no longer the golden boy. He was a pariah, a cautionary tale for all those who chased quick riches without a moral compass. The media, once his biggest cheerleaders, now reveled in his downfall, dissecting every mistake, every misstep, every public humiliation with a predatory glee. I watched it all unfold, my heart heavy, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach with each new headline. I knew this was coming. I had seen the signs, the reckless spending, the questionable associations, the desperate attempts to maintain an image that was no longer sustainable, no longer real. But knowing it was coming didn't make it any easier to watch. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, a devastating spectacle, powerless to intervene, powerless to stop the inevitable destruction. I started preparing myself for the inevitable call, the desperate plea for help that I knew deep down would eventually come. I imagined what I would say, how I would respond. Would I be angry, resentful? Would I remind him of his cruel words, of the pain he had inflicted? Or would I simply open my arms, as a father should, and offer the unconditional love he had so carelessly discarded, so foolishly thrown away? The answer, I knew, was the latter, because despite everything, despite the searing pain and the profound rejection, he was still my son. And a father's love, unlike a millionaire's fleeting fortune, is not so easily depleted, not so easily extinguished. It endures. The call came on a Tuesday, almost exactly a year to the day after his brutal, soul-crushing rejection. My phone, usually silent in the evenings, its quiet broken only by the occasional text from a friend or a reminder from my calendar, buzzed with an unfamiliar, out-of-state number. My heart leaped into my throat, a frantic bird trapped in my chest. I knew. I just knew, with an instinctual certainty that transcended logic. Taking a deep, fortifying breath, I answered, my voice surprisingly steady, belying the violent tremor that had begun in my hands. "Hello?" My voice was calm, measured, a stark contrast to the tumultuous emotions swirling within me. "Dad?" The voice on the other end was barely a whisper, hoarse and broken, utterly devoid of the arrogance, the self-assured swagger I had grown accustomed to hearing in his public appearances. It was the voice of a child, lost and afraid, stripped bare of all pretense. It was Michael. My Michael. "Michael, son, is that really you?" I asked, a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled my knees, washing over me. "Yes, Dad, it's me." There was a long, agonizing pause, filled only with the sound of his ragged, uneven breathing, each inhale and exhale a testament to his distress. I messed up, Dad. I messed up everything. Completely." My eyes welled up instantly, but I fought back the tears, forcing them back, refusing to let them fall. This wasn't the time for my pain, for my long-held grievances. This was the time for his. This was the moment he needed me. "What happened, son? Where are you? Are you safe?" I'm at a motel, a really run-down one, in downtown LA. They took everything, Dad. The house, the cars, the bank accounts, every single thing I owned. I have nothing left, absolutely nothing. His voice cracked, splintering with raw, unadulterated despair, a sound that tore at my very soul. I don't know what to do. I have nowhere to go. I'm completely lost. I'm coming to get you, I said, without a moment's hesitation, the words leaving my mouth before I even consciously formed the thought. It was an automatic, primal response. Tell me the address. I'll be there as fast as I possibly can. Just hold on. But why, Dad? After everything I said, everything I did to you, why would you even consider helping me? Why would you come? His voice was laced with disbelief, with a profound sense of unworthiness. Because you're my son, Michael, I said, my voice firm, unwavering, imbued with all the love and conviction I possessed. And a father, a true father, doesn't abandon his child, no matter what, no matter how difficult, no matter how painful. Give me the address, son. I'm on my way. He gave me the address, his voice still shaky, but with a faint, almost imperceptible hint of something I hadn't heard in a very long time. Hope, a fragile, flickering ember in the darkness. I hung up the phone, grabbed my keys, and started the long, arduous drive to Los Angeles. The journey was filled with a dizzying whirlwind of emotions. Profound relief that he had finally reached out, a deep aching sadness for his desperate plight, and a quiet, resolute determination to help him pick up the shattered pieces of his life. I didn't feel triumphant, or vindicated, or any sense of, I told you so. Just a profound, overwhelming sense of paternal duty, a love that transcended all pain. When I arrived at the rundown neon-lit motel, the sight of him nearly broke my heart all over again. He was sitting on the curb outside, hunched over, his once expensive clothes rumpled and stained, his usually meticulously styled hair unkempt and matted. He looked like a ghost of his former self, thin and pale, his eyes hollow and haunted, reflecting a deep, pervasive weariness. The arrogant, self-assured millionaire was gone, vanished without a trace, replaced by a broken, vulnerable young man. He looked up as my old, trusty pickup truck pulled into the dimly lit parking lot, its headlights cutting through the gloom, and his eyes, once so cold and dismissive, now filled with unshed tears, glistening in the harsh light. He stood slowly, hesitantly, as if unsure of his footing, and then, with a choked, guttural sob, he ran towards me, stumbling slightly in his haste. I met him halfway, my arms opening wide, ready to embrace him. He collapsed into my embrace, clinging to me like a drowning man to a life raft, his grip desperate and tight. His body shook uncontrollably with deep, wrenching sobs, and I held him tight, stroking his hair, murmuring soft, soothing reassurances into his ear. It's okay, son. It's okay. I'm here now. You're safe. We stood there for a long, silent time, in the harsh, unforgiving glare of the motel parking lot. A father holding his broken, weeping son. All the pain, all the anger, all the resentment I had harbored for the past year melted away in that singular, profound moment. All that mattered was that he was here, in my arms, finally allowing himself to be vulnerable, finally seeking the comfort he had so vehemently rejected. When his sobs finally subsided, leaving him weak and trembling, I pulled back slightly, looking into his tear-streaked, exhausted face. Let's get you out of here, son. Let's go home. We drove in silence for a while, the steady hum of the road beneath the tires the only sound breaking the quiet. The city lights of Los Angeles slowly faded into the darkness as we headed north. Finally, he spoke, his voice still raw and fragile. I'm so incredibly sorry, Dad. I was an idiot, a complete and utter fool. I let the money, the fame, the attention, it changed me. It corrupted me. I thought I was invincible. I thought I didn't need anyone, especially not you. I was so wrong. We all make mistakes, son, I said gently, keeping my eyes fixed on the road ahead, my voice soft but firm. The important thing, the truly important thing, is what you learn from them. It's how you choose to move forward. I learned that everything I chased, everything I thought mattered, everything I sacrificed for, it was all meaningless. The friends, the parties, the luxury, the endless pursuit of more, it was all fake. It vanished the moment the money did. You were the only real thing I had, the only constant, and I threw you away. I discarded you like trash. He paused, his voice thick with profound shame and regret. Can you ever truly forgive me for that? I reached over and squeezed his shoulder, my touch conveying more than words ever could. There's nothing to forgive, Michael. Not really. I never stopped loving you. Not for a single moment. Not even when you pushed me away. A father's love doesn't just turn off. We drove straight back to my small, familiar apartment in Portland. It was a stark, almost jarring contrast to the sprawling mansion he had once inhabited, a world away from the opulence he had grown accustomed to. But as he stepped inside, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Relief, perhaps, or a profound sense of coming home, of finally finding sanctuary. He looked around at the familiar clutter, the worn, comfortable furniture, the framed photos of us scattered throughout the room, and a soft, genuine smile touched his lips, a smile I hadn't seen in far too long. Over the next few weeks, Michael slowly, painstakingly began to heal. He was a different man, fundamentally transformed. The arrogance, the dismissive attitude, the self-importance were gone, replaced by a quiet humility, a newfound appreciation for the simple things. He helped me around the garage, not as a boss, not as a wealthy benefactor, but as an eager apprentice, eager to learn, eager to work with his hands again, to feel the honest grit of labor. He listened intently as I talked about cars, about life, about the profound satisfaction found in honest work and simple joys. He ate the home-cooked meals I prepared, savoring every bite, no longer accustomed to the gourmet fare he once took for granted, finding comfort in the familiar. We talked for hours, late into the night, about everything and nothing. He recounted the dizzying highs of his millionaire life, the immense pressures, the crushing loneliness that came with it, the constant gnawing fear of being exposed as a fraud. He admitted to the cascade of bad decisions, the reckless spending, the toxic relationships that had drained him emotionally and financially. And he spoke with raw, unflinching honesty about the profound shame he felt for rejecting me, for letting his newfound wealth blind him to what truly mattered, to the only real connection he had. "I genuinely thought being rich would make me happy, Dad," he confessed one evening, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. "But it just made me empty. It made me lose myself. And in doing so, I lost you, the most important person in my life." "You found yourself again, son," I replied, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder, feeling the familiar warmth of his presence. "And you found me. That's what truly matters. That's the real victory." He started looking for a job, not in tech, not in finance, not in any field that promised quick riches, but something simpler, something that would allow him to rebuild his life from the ground up, brick by painstaking brick. He applied for positions at local businesses, humble jobs that paid an honest wage, jobs that required genuine effort. He was no longer chasing millions. He was chasing meaning, purpose, and a sense of belonging. One day he came home from an interview, a small, hopeful smile on his face, a light in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. "I got a job, Dad, at the local community center, helping with their after-school programs, tutoring kids. It's not much, but it feels right, it feels good." My heart swelled with an almost unbearable pride. This was the Michael I knew, the one who cared about making a difference, about contributing something positive to the world, not just about accumulating money. This was the son I had raised. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Michael slowly, steadily regained his strength, his confidence, his sense of self. But this time, it was a genuine confidence, rooted in self-worth, in purpose, not in net worth or fleeting external validation. He reconnected with old friends, people who had known him before the money, people who genuinely cared about him, not his status. He started volunteering regularly, giving back to the community, finding profound purpose and quiet joy in helping others, in making a tangible difference in their lives. He never touched the allowance he had sent me, the money that had felt so tainted. Instead, he insisted on paying his own way, contributing to the household expenses, eager to stand on his own 2 feet, to earn his keep. He was learning the true value of hard work, of earning what you have, of building something real, something lasting, something that couldn't be taken away by market fluctuations or legal battles. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, he turned to me, his eyes clear and full of genuine affection, a warmth that radiated from him. "You know, Dad," he said, his voice soft, reflective, "that day I told you to leave. It was the biggest mistake of my entire life. I was so lost, so utterly caught up in the illusion of success, in the pursuit of something that was ultimately empty. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for being here, for taking me in, when I had nothing left, when everyone else abandoned me." "You never had nothing, son," I said, my voice thick with emotion, a lump forming in my throat. "You always had me. You always had my love. And you always will. That's one thing that will never change." He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes, illuminating his entire face. I know that now, Dad. And it's worth more than all the millions in the world, more than any mansion or private jet. My son, the millionaire who had rejected me, had lost everything. But in losing everything and hitting rock bottom, he had found himself again. And in his lowest, most desperate moment, he had finally realized that the greatest wealth he possessed wasn't in his bank account, wasn't in material possessions, but in the unbreakable bond of family, in the enduring, unconditional love of a father who had never stopped believing in him, not even for a second. And that, I realized, was the greatest inheritance of all, the only one that truly mattered.